my approach to language learning is I'll spend 6 months without speaking to anyone. Because first of all, I want to increase my vocabulary. I want to make sure that I understand the language, that I can understand what I read, I can understand what I hear, I can understand the radio. So I do a lot of listening and reading before I start speaking, so that when I start speaking, I'm already somewhat used to the language. I find that's very important because it's painful to start speaking to someone when you don't understand what they're saying. You've only got a few words, you're stumbling and bumbling, and it's just a very stressful experience. The more comfortable you are, the more you understand what they're saying, the more relaxed you are, the better you're going to do. So my approach is always spend a lot of time, like on Czech, I've been at it for 6 months, I just listen and read. I spent a year listening and reading to Russian before I spoke to anyone. And I was only doing an hour a day. Now, if you put in 5 hours a day, you'll go more quickly. But the whole point is to give yourself a chance. Because there's nothing worse than saying something to someone and they come back and you don't understand what they're saying. Comprehension is a bigger piece. It's more important to me than the ability to speak well. You'll eventually speak better if you speak more. But if you don't understand what people are saying, you're, difficult. Yeah. Well, Link, lingq.com, is basically a community of learners. So we have members all over the world. And what we do is we provide audio, in other words, things you can listen to, and text. So every single lesson in our library, and there are tens of thousands of lessons in English, French, Spanish, Japanese, Chinese, Russian, you name it. There's 19 languages. So these are available for free download. So you can just go in and download the audio, download the text, away you go. However, we have built in a bunch of sort of functions so that you listen. When you read, you can look up words on an online dictionary. You save the words to a database, which starts to generate statistics, how many words you know, how many words are new to you. This is all very helpful because you're studying on your own, so it gives you a sense that you're actually improving. And then any word that you saved is now highlighted in yellow, which is very important because the big thing in language learning is to notice. We all forget. You can't rely on your memory. What you need to do is to train yourself to notice. And if you notice certain things again and again and again, eventually your brain will recognize the pattern and start to produce it correctly. So a lot of the things we do at our site are there to help you notice. You needn't worry about trying to remember. So the highlighting helps you notice. Any words or phrases that you save, we create flashcards. There's dictation tests. There's a number of different things to help you notice. People have to realize that when you're learning a language, it's a gradual process. It's not like I studied these 10 words, therefore I know them. It just doesn't work unless you're a genius. You have to, of course, let go of your own language. So you have to take in the new language and notice. For example, if you're studying Japanese, the Japanese will put the verb at the end. Watashi wa ko omoimasu. Okay? You have to get to the point where that's natural. Our natural inclination in English is to say, watashi wa omoimasu, like I think that something, right? So you put the I think first. When you're in Japanese, you have to get used to. So it's not enough to read somewhere that the Japanese put the verb at the end. That's not going to do it. You'll still continue, and I hear lots of Japanese people, when they speak English, they'll say, it is raining today, I think. So they still want to put the verb at the end. So you have to train yourself to follow the patterns of the new language. So the explanations can help, but more than that, you have to listen and read a lot. And again, on our system, if I see phrases now in Czech that are typical of Czech, but not typical of English, I save them. So then I can review these phrases. So I see 10, 15, 20 examples of this pattern, which is different. And it's not enough to understand it. Chinese people, for example, because in spoken Chinese, there's no difference between he and she. Ta, or koi, in Cantonese, it's the same, he or she. That's not a difficult concept. If you tell that to Chinese people on day one of your English class, they will all understand, right? 5 years later, 50% of the time they'll still say, my husband, she, my wife, he, because it's not a matter of understanding. It's a matter of training your brain to adopt naturally a new pattern. And that's just a matter of a lot of exposure, reading and listening, but you have to pay attention. And that's what we try to do, is to force people to pay attention. So reviewing a lot of examples can help you pay attention. Underlining while you're reading can help you pay attention. And if you pay attention often enough, the brain will eventually pick up on it. I think it's important to be relaxed. I think it's important a lot of people are too uptight about their pronunciation. First of all, let me say that I know people. In fact, I had a visitor the other day, he was Russian. He spoke absolutely excellent English. He used words better than the average native speaker in Canada. But he had a very heavy Russian accent. It doesn't matter, as long as you're understood. So the first thing I always say about accent is don't worry about it, because it's more important to use words well, okay? However, everyone is vain. I think, people want to have good pronunciation because they feel they look better, they sound better. So unless people can't understand you, pronunciation is not such a big problem, to me. But everyone wants to sound as much as possible like a native speaker. Whether you're learning Japanese, Chinese, French, English, it doesn't matter. And I think what I did, for example, I listen a lot. And in particular, for example, in Chinese, where you have tones, ma, 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 ma in Mandarin, right? So I listen to a certain amount of content, like there are these very famous there's a famous Chinese comic dialogue called xiangsheng. And these guys, they exaggerate. Plus it's funny. And I like the voice. So I listened to a limited amount of content over and over and over again. I listened while exercising, while doing the dishes, wherever I could, even if I didn't understand it all. So that the music of the language, the intonation of the language, starts to basically trigger something in my brain. And when it comes to pronunciation, intonation is at least as important as the individual pronunciation of the words. And so it's a matter of a lot of exposure. If you want to, nowadays it's so easy, you can record yourself, compare yourself to whoever you want to imitate. If you want to speak with an Australian accent, or if you're learning English, or you want to speak with a British accent or an American accent, you can find that content, find someone whose voice you like, listen to it over and over again, then try and record yourself and try to imitate that person. And you can start to see, again, to notice the differences. And noticing is a big part of pronunciation. Like I know, for example, a lot of people, say, who are not English speakers, say Europeans, if they see a word like word, they'll say word, W-O-R-D, word, because in their language, O is O. In English, because we have the strange spelling, word is W-O-R-D, bird is B-I-R-D, heard is H-E-A-R-D, but they're all pronounced the same. Bird, heard, word. So a lot of foreigners, Spanish speakers, Slavic speakers, they'll go word, beard, heard, because they're influenced, they haven't noticed. They're influenced by their own alphabet, and they don't notice that, in fact, in English, those three sounds are the same. So again, you have to train yourself to notice, because you can't pronounce what you can't hear. So the first thing is to notice how the language is pronounced. Another good example in Japanese, like very often I'd get a visitor from Canada when I lived in Japan, and I'd introduce the visitor to Mr. Kato. Okay, Kato is K-A-T-O. So I say, John, this is Mr. Kato. Hello, Mr. Kato. Why? Why? I just finished saying Kato, and yet he says Kato, because on the card it says K-A-T-O. So it is important to notice. And if we notice and listen a lot and practice, we can improve our pronunciation. それじゃあ日本語でね、どうやって英語を勉強するかという問題についてちょっといくつかアドバイス出しましょう。まずそれ皆さんご存知だと思うんですけれども、英語の場合はですね、動詞がこれ最初の方に来るわけですね。I think that we should do something。それは日本と逆なんですよ。でそういうパターン、それは一つの例ですけれども、英語のパターンと日本語のパターンは基本的には違います。でもちろん文法のルールがもう何千もあると思うんです。それをいちいちここで説明しても誰でも覚えることはできませんので、だから本を読んだ時、 あるいは何かを聞いた時にですね、その英語のパターンをですね、これ注意しないといけないんですよ。注意しないといけません。で、たくさんの日本人がね、私よく英語をよく話せる人でもですね、よくこの、you know, this is very difficult, I think. だからその日本語のパターンから離れられないわけですよ。だからまずそれが一番大切だと思うんですよ。